Hi, this is Anna Imagination, and welcome to the Ethical Asshole. I am your host, the Salty Bitch. So I'm starting to look into, well, I'm not starting to look into sequencing. I am the bitch and the goddess and the queen of sequencing. It's a logic thing. So I am a logician, and that is really an understatement. I've studied logic for about 30 plus years, and it's like in my brain. It's in all of our brains. And this is where a lot of people really don't know what logic is. I'm going to be doing a whole thing on logic and teaching a philosophy class and all that jazz. But more interesting is when you understand what sequencing is, it is basically taking out the garbage. It is exactly taking out the garbage. A sequence is a chain reaction. This is chain reaction science. But better than that, it's actually the domino effect, which is also a chain reaction science. And you've got little roles and you got sequences and you got all these things. And it's really, really simple. I mean, we're talking second grade simple stuff. Well, I mean, that's what you do when you give a child like 10 years old, 4 years old. Well, not 4, choking hazard, probably closer to 6, 7, a domino set. As soon as you give them the domino set, these people start doing domino sequencing, because what else do you do with dominoes? I think there's like a domino game where you put them on their backs so they're friends and you match them up. I guess it's like a matching game. I don't know, but I always like put them up and I created these massive long chain reaction sequencing. I spent many, many hours playing around with like, oh, that's what the mouse trap game is. It's logic. It's literally, this is how you do logic. And it's how a catalyst creates a series of chain events and how each and every sequence is the catalyst for the successor. This is all logic. This is all we do. So every time you're logical, what you're actually doing is you're taking out your garbage. And if you're not logical, you're cluttering up your sequence with garbage. And that's going to cause obstruction. In addition to causing obstruction, it's also going to cause interference. And physics has a lot to say about interference. So I've been trying to figure out how to talk to people, especially non-scientist people, for a very long time. And I love being a scientist. I love being a scientist. And I love, like completely regurgitating the vomitous mass that is the vocabulary of a scientist. I love it so much. And when we sit down with physics and we just like, we start going at it. Oh, it's like a thing where I gush and there's physics and then there's math and then there's explosions and we get chemistry and biology and it all comes together and it's gorgeous. I love it. But my problem is, well, I like people. I really do love people, but there's like this communication barrier, which is why I'm studying linguistical physics. Linguistical physics is when you take linguists and, well, you take linguistics and you take logic and you take word and then you take etymology and then you put them all together with physics and you go, I mean, look at these things carry energy. It's great. It's wonderful. I love it so much. And then I start to study the science of what words do to people's brains and minds, and it's amazing shit. But then trying to explain this to your non-common person or your common person, your non-scientist. I have no idea what to call these people. They're just not scientists. And they function completely different. Now, I grew up my whole life. Well, okay, I got to be careful how I say this because I actually had a lot of scientists around me because I aspired to be them, not realizing I was one of them. And then I end up just like literally creating a community of scientists, always a community of scientists, having no idea that I was always surrounded by a bunch of scientists, not realizing that I was one of them. And after a while, I also had a pocket of people who were non-scientists. And I was fine when I was among the scientists. There was no problems whatsoever. And then I would get around the non-scientist people and there would be this massive breakdown of communication. And then, and this was really, really interesting. And this is amazing because you kind of see this on Big Bang Theory. Now, there's a few things about the show Big Bang Theory that I really don't like. But that being said, there's one thing that really does hold true is when the scientists are talking their language, you can definitely see when the non-scientists can't understand them. And then you've got that communication gap. Now, that communication gap for my logical brain, I'm going, oh my God, I want to play with it because that's the scientist in me coming out. So basically you got a sequence. And this sequence is called the scientific method. Now, to study and travel through the process of scientific method. Now, their scientific method has about 5 stages to it, but I really I reverse engineered scientific method and ended up with a 12-stage sequence as opposed to the 5-stage sequence. And the difference between the traditional scientific method is it's simpler, but it also has a fallacy inside of it that causes logical fallacy. And that actually creates more work for the scientists, especially when first of all, it runs a risk for confirmed bias, but it also introduces a problem where if they are chasing a red herring, trying to prove a red herring, they could be spending a lot of resources because they skipped the first 6 stages. Because they skipped the first 6 stages of my process, they now have wasted resources, more work, and they end up trying to prove things that don't even exist. And it's not until decades have passed before they go, oh, this can't be proven, and or someone proves something that contradicts their theory. Now, this is a logical fallacy because they removed logic from the sequence. What they do is they create an hypothesis prior to their scientific method instead of a question. And as a result, the hypothesis, which you should never create prior to the process of scientific method, you should always do that at the end of it as a temporary placeholder. And what ends up happening is if you have an incorrect or a logical fallacy in your hypothesis, it's going to create a problem where you start chasing a red herring, and now you're wasting research on and resources and time going after a theory that isn't even logical or possible because they skipped logic. Now, in my scientific method, I first of all have an entire process that removes confirmed bias. Rule number 2, under no circumstance do you ever form a hypothesis before you do scientific method. Hypotheses are always reserved at the very end and only when it is using the highest probability of mathematical rejection to prevent this from happening. In addition to that, a hypothesis is a temporary placeholder. There's to be no emotional attachment to it. When you start a scientific method with my process, it is strictly using questions only. And this allows the RAS, reticular articulating system of the subconscious mind, to open up for filtration so that you can become open-minded, abandon all bias, and then you can proceed with the research in the most likely outcome of mathematics, while you are in the process of reverse engineering Mother Nature, which is how you get an academic discipline. Now, because of this scientific method that I use, it has a very step-by-step logical format of sequencing that I use. And it also is identical to the development and the stages of academic discipline. And it is also how you do reverse engineering. It is the science of reverse engineering. So when you have all the 12 steps, as opposed to literally a fraction of scientific method, it saves time and you actually go through the steps of reverse engineering, which is how Euclid discovered geometry. It's also how Pythagoras discovered everything he discovered. It's how Newton discovered physics. This is how you literally discover any academic discipline. And once you learn how to reverse engineer using the 12 steps of scientific method, you can literally do whatever you want. It's really cool because you're learning how to translate Mother Nature using all of your, well, we're a vivometer. That's a new word. We're a vivometer. When you understand that you're a vivometer and then you understand how to use your vivometer, it's great. The world changes, and then you become a vivometer. I want video editor. I want words like vivometer, and I want it blinking like vivometer. So that's when you become a vivometer. And when you are a vivometer, you now can use yourself to take Mother Nature's temperature, and now you can use metrics, and I need to be over here. It's like playing hot and cold with Mother Nature. It is exactly like you are playing hot and cold with Mother Nature. So as you learn to use your vivometer, what you do is you end up learning how to take out your garbage in your sequence because now you're a vivometer. So as you become a better vivometer, which is what we all should be doing, which is what a lot of us are currently doing, which is what all the 6 perspectives are currently working on, but they just don't know it yet, that, oh, I'm a vivometer. Yes, you are a vivometer. Thank you for catching up with science. So you've got this massive thing called the vivometer that's all over inside of you. And it's your ability to use your body and your brain and your mind and all of your body parts to literally take Mother Nature's, you are sticking yourself up Mother Nature's ass. That is really what you're doing. You are sticking yourself up Mother Nature's ass. That is what I do in the lab all day. I probe Mother Nature with my body as a vivometer. So as a vivometer, you realize that you can literally take Mother Nature's temperature in her 18 different languages so that you can understand what she's saying to you. I translate Mother Nature. So as I'm doing all of this, I'm getting readings because I'm the vivometer, and I'm now doing metric using physics and math and logic to take all of this. Now, there's a sequence. And while I'm doing all of this, while we all do the things that we do, living causes this, our sequence gets cluttered with garbage and our RAS gets clunked up with crap. So you got to clean out your RAS. And if you don't know how to clean out your RAS, your filtration starts to shut down, and then you get a biased opinion. You get a whole lot of problems. First, your entire scope gets completely out of whack. So your vivometer runs off of a perspective scope. Boy, this is about as literal as I can possibly make it. Your entire vivometer runs off of a perspective scope. Your perspective scope is your subconscious mind. So while you are learning how to take all of these readings as the human vivometer that you are, by the way, the word is vivometer. So it's like viv, like life. It's a life meter. It's a life metric. It's vivometer. So when you realize that you're a vivometer and that your vivometer is literally hooked up to your perspective scope, you are learning how to use these two tools inside of your brain to work together so you can make metrics, so you can make the right decision for you. And you are aligning your choices with Mother Nature's natural sequence. So life gets really easy, really, really fast. But as you go through life, especially if you are knee deep in the crap that is the unnatural sequence of man. Oh my God, that thing is such crap. The unnatural sequence of man. I'm going to write that down. The unnatural sequence of man. So the unnatural sequence of man is literally everything that is not Mother Nature's sequence. It is everything that is not science. Literally, you've got science and not science. You've got nature and you've got not nature. So everything that is not nature, not science, not logical, and is opinion is over there in the unnatural sequence of man. And that crap clutters up your perspective scope. So now you can't use your vivometer correctly because your scope and your RAS is all crammed up with garbage. So you got to clean out your RAS and you got to take out your garbage by cleaning your sequence. In order to do this, you need tools for your perspective scope and you need to know how to use your vivometer. So once you're aware of your vivometer, then you have the ability to go, oh my God, my vivometer is off calibration. I must go calibrate my vivometer. And that's exactly how I talk. That is exactly the kind of shit that I do. I recalibrate my vivometer. And that actually is what brings me to this particular YouTube video. I have been trying to figure out how to communicate with the unnatural sequence of man for a while, but I can only do this using their language. Problem number one. Problem number two. Every time I try and convene with the unnatural sequence of man, I have notes here because my short-term memory is really shit because I literally run off of pure improvisation, and that makes repetition and remembering things really hard. So I'm constantly looking down my notes. So when I realize that I'm walking among the unnatural sequence of man, one of my problems that I have is it clogs up my calibration with my vivometer because they are so out of tune to the natural sequence of nature. So I'm going, all right, how am I going to keep myself calibrated to nature while also communicating with man, which runs off of the unnatural sequence and contradicts calibrated vivometer that is me? How the hell do you do all this while also making sure that they don't clog up your RAS? Now, clogging up your RAS is the biggest challenge because RASs get clogged up. Just again, it's the reticular articulating system. That's of your subconscious mind. And that's what controls all of your filtration. That's going to determine if you're going to be open-minded or closed-minded. If you're closed-minded, it's because you got a clogged up RAS. But if you're open-minded, you cleaned out your RAS. So you want to make sure you keep your RAS clean so you stay open-minded, or else you start seeing everything in the little bubble. We don't want to live in the bubble. The bubble is a bad place to be. I have a whole thing on the bubble. So when you realize that you got this perspective scope and you got to clean out your RAS, you now have the ability to control how open-minded or closed-minded you are. So I'm consciously aware of all this stuff because I got science. And I'm sitting here going, all right, now how the hell am I going to communicate with a bunch of non-scientists with an unnatural sequence of man when they keep clogging up my RAS? And I realized they clog up the RAS because they give me crap words. Now, this is where words with linguistical physics really comes into it. And when you drop the wrong word, now that's a vessel filled with energy. And when you drop the wrong word, what the wrong word really is a red herring. It distracts. So you're sitting here focused, because this is all about focus, because this is optic physics, people. So you're sitting here focusing your perspective scope on what you need to focus it on, but they gave you the wrong word with the wrong energy, and now you're over here looking. But the scope is over here. So then your RAS starts chasing the red herring, and now you're far away from the focal point. And you don't even realize it because you've got a clogged up RAS, and now you're inside a little point of perspective called the bubble. The bubble is a death sentence. The bubble is where 96% of the people live. And the more you are exposed to abuse and the wrong words and the ignorant people who don't even know the right words, the more your riles is going to get clogged up, the more you're going to lose focus, the more you're going to chase all these red herrings. So I did this really awesome graph for my daughter this morning. I'm going to go ahead and do it for you here. You use your imagination until I get my video editor. This is what we're going to do. So right over here. No, I want it over here. I want it over here. So right over here. All right. Right here, you've got the natural sequence, which is Mother Nature. Now, this is great. This is great. All animals are inside of this. All animals are inside of this. It's great. They've got this figured out. Yeah, that's right. Right now, the baboon is smarter than us because they've got this figured out. All animals exist inside of this lovely little thing. It's called the circle of life. And it's also called the equilibrium, balance. And all of science is inside of here also. Anyone who's mentally healthy, who never has to use a chakra stone, they're inside of here because they have figured out the natural sequence. Now, there's this other one over here called the unnatural sequence of man, and that's where economy is, the dollar, and all the shit that's happening in our society right now. This is where politics is. This is where the conformists and the woke culture are located. This is where all the mentally ill people are located. This is where 96% of the population is located. Meanwhile, this is where everyone who's got life figured out is happy and joyous. Now, there's a movement happening right now in our society where all the people over here, well, a few of them are going, this is wrong. We need to be over there. But they don't know where over there is because they don't have science. The scientists have science and they went, oh, we're in the wrong place. Let's just go here. So the scientists use their science to just go, they're done. We're here. It took me a year to clean all of my mental illness because I had science. So as soon as I figured this out, I went, oh, I just need to use physics, math, logic. Okay, I'm here now. And this is how it's done. Everyone else, well, a lot of them are inside defending this little bubble. And then you got other people who are like, oh no, this isn't the right place, but they don't have science. So they go the other direction. So you've got a whole lot of people running off to this other location. We call that the oasis. And then you've got other people who are going down there. And then you've got other people going because they don't have science. So they don't have the AIDNS, which is the abstract interdimensional navigational system, which is science to get you to the natural sequence that is what all the other animals have figured out, where the balance and the equilibrium is and where all the science is. So that's the chaos that be in our society today. So when you are in this group and you realize, I don't want to be here anymore because it's chaos, and it is because it's the unnatural sequence of man, and you realize, I got to get out of here because it's insane, and it is because there literally is no logic in this place. It is void of reasoning. It's called the reason void. Oh, it's great. It's the reasoning void. We're going to write that one down. The reasoning void. The void of reason. I love that. It is the void of reason. So the void of reason, by the time I'm done, it's going to be like a whole quest with kings and knights and a search for truth. And it's going to be like, oh yes, we are leaving the void of reason as we journey forth to the land of natural balance and equilibrium. Like that's what we're all doing, basically. We're on a quest. But the ones who've got the science know the map and how to get there with the compass. They've got the navigational equipment. The people over here who don't have science, they're guessing poorly. So they're all over the place. And they've got like little pockets of people all over, and they're lost and they're wandering in the wilderness of nothing. That's what this is called, the wilderness of nothing, which is that space between joy and happiness and insanity. And then you got the wilderness of nothing. So there's a lot of people who've been wandering around in the wilderness of nothing for 20 years. And they're like, oh, yes, this is a lifelong journey. No, not really. If you had science, it'd take you a year. But hey, some people just want to figure it out for themselves. So they're wandering around in the wilderness of nothing for about 20 years. And then they start settling down and they find their own community. And they're trying to interpret nature without any comprehension of science, which actually is the science of nature. Isn't this funny how it all turns out? And eventually some of them get closer and they figure it out. A lot of them then stop and then they decide to make up their own words. And when that happens, we're back to red herrings that take them that direction. So this is what we've all got going on. And then you've got the arena. The arena. I don't go near the arena. The arena is where the people who are red and blue get together and they fight. There's a lot of people who go to the arena. I don't play that game. The arena is where all the opposed sides go and they just punch each other verbally in the face. And that is all of the internet, where people just go in and they punch each other in the face with words, not realizing that words are physics, which really ends badly for pretty much anyone who's in the arena, which is another reason why I don't go to the arena. The arena was sponsored by the unnatural formula of man. They built an arena. They thought that'd be entertaining. So you've got a lot of people who are going over to the arena. You got a lot of people who are in the unnatural formula for entertainment. They have the arena. You got all these people who are wandering in the wilderness of nothing going, it's going to take you a lifetime. We'll never get there. We have to wander the wilderness for 40 years. And then they start their own religions and cults, and they tell the saga to their children. Oh, it was horrible one day. We decided to leave the unnatural laws of man called Wonderland. And then we wandered the wilderness of nothing for 40 years. One day you will get there too. Or you could just use science and be there in a year. But hey, to each his own. So that is literally all of humanity right now in a nutshell. I like to summarize all of this by calling it societal puberty. And we have zits. Now, the people who are like with the animal kingdom and we figured all this out, we don't have zits because we figured it out. So my science is the science of growth of all of this. And this is the best part. We've done this twice before. We did this in the 16th century, and we did this again in the 4th century. Well, we did this the first time in the 4th century. So we've been here before. We did it in the 4th century and in the 16th century. So we're doing it again. But the people who are not inside the natural sequence, they don't know that they've done this before. So they're going, what's going on? And the people who are in the natural sequence are going, oh, we got puberty again, guys. You don't remember when we did this when we were 4? You don't remember when we did this when we 2? Yeah, we do this every time we grow up. We do this every time we grow up. We did it when we were 2 and we became, this is our birthday. Are you kidding me? This is our birthday. We're turning 5 right now. That's what we're doing. So let me decode all that for you. There are levels of awareness. Levels of awareness. And when a person can be at 12 levels of awareness. Now there's more levels, but let's just start with the first 12. You're most likely a level 2, 3, 4. You're probably closer to wanting to be a 6, but you're probably stuck in 2 or 3. You most likely are stuck in 2 or 3 when you really want to be a 6. And you're trying to get to 7, but you can't get to 7 because this is logic and this is sequencing until you fix 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which you haven't done. So now you're stuck at 2 when you really want to be at 7. At 7, oh, that's when everything changes. I love 7. So these are the levels of awareness, otherwise called the 12 ethical stages of perspective growth of human evolution. So when you get stuck in any of these sequences because your logic is all cracked up, because you don't have logic, math, or physics, so you don't know how to clean all this out, what ends up happening is you get stuck in one of the earlier stages of awareness. This is how the mind works. This is exactly how the mind works because it's all sequential. So you're stuck at 2, 3, 4. And what ends up happening is you might be there and another person might be there, but there's 8 billion of us. Now, when you have the collective consciousness and you put all of us together, we form a unit. And the unit is represented by the majority. And the majority of us right now are moving from 4 years old or 4th level of awareness into the 5th level. That's what's going on. Now, we've done this 2 other times before. There was one other time before that, but we didn't document it accurately well enough because we didn't have the written word back then. So I wasn't able to point at it and go, oh, there it is. But we do know that it happened when we turned from 2 to 3. This is when the majority of the conscious collective, the majority of people on the planet were at that 2 level awareness, and they moved over to 3. This is what happened in the 4th century with the Roman Empire. It's their fault. And then it happened again when we were all 3 and we turned 4. And that's what happened in the 16th century and the age of the Reformation. The age of Enlightenment, the age of Reformation. That's what was going on. We were all 3 and we turned 4. And that's it. That's it right there. We were 3, we turned 4. So our society was built for 4-year-olds, 4 level of ethical consciousness, awareness, literally. And now we are all growing out of that 4th, and most of us can't breathe because we're grown out of it. Now our clothes don't fit because we got puberty. Yeah, that's right. You get puberty when you're ethically 5 years old. Puberty changes differently when you're an ethical perspective as opposed to the physical body age. The ethics are different than the other. So we are all moving from the fifth ethic or the fourth ethic into the fifth ethic, but the majority of us are moving. Now, the second and the third-year-olds, they don't like that. And those are your reds and your blues, and they're going, it's change. So that's what they're doing right now. The thirds and the fourths are arguing over the fifth growing up. That's it. That's why we got puberty. So that's pretty much what's going on with our society right now. It's growth. And that's it. This is literally the science of growth, because it's how we evolve, it's how we move, it's how we grow up. After we hit 5, we're all going to see a mess. And this is the best part. Once you get into the stages of growth, once you start to understand the sequence of growth, the growth sequence, basically time changes. And this is why time doesn't make sense outside of the abstract, is because time is relative to the self. It is literally your relationship and your relativity to time itself, which is only defined by the self, which is the stagnant point of A. So you have here's my origin, and here's where I'm growing, and now you've got time. And time is the sequence or the block in which you were a certain age, which is what all of time is literally the conscious awareness's growth, are the conscious collective's growth from point A to point B. And it literally has characteristics of our behavior based upon where we were with our growth stage. It's really fascinating stuff. So when you get closer to where we are as we move, it gets faster. It's not that it's getting faster, it's that you're finally growing as fast as time is moving. But if you're in the unnatural sequence, you're not going to be keeping up with the growth sequence, which means you are growing slower than time is moving. I'm going to say that one again. It means that when you are aligned and you are growing properly, you are growing as fast as time is moving. Now you're not going to notice time moving, which is where I am. I don't notice time moving at all, because I grow literally with the speed of time. It's literally growing with the speed of time. If you are not growing with the speed of time, if you are actually growing slower than time is moving, that's when you start to see aging, rot. It's because you are not growing as fast as time is moving. And that happens when you live in the unnatural sequence of man, because the unnatural sequence of man is the removal of you from the timeline or the time stream. And the time string is the growth sequence. So the world is growing right along just fine. Why? Which is why animals don't really look like they age, is because animals know how to grow and keep up with time. So time is moving. Either you're growing with time or you're not. And humans don't know how, because they've interfered with this process with the unnatural sequence of man. So once you understand this and you start coming over into the natural sequence and you start catching your growth up, then you start growing and suddenly you stop aging, because you're in the growth stream and you're actually moving alongside with time at the right pace. And that's growing alongside time, inside of time. And it's really, the thing is also, it changes your perspective of time, because it's the difference between watching a rainstorm on the outside, which I've done, by the way. It's the most amazing thing, is to be on the outside of a rainstorm. Oh my God, it was amazing. I was standing there looking out in the distance and I could see the sheet falling, and it was like feet in front of me. It was amazing. And I could just look off into the distance and see this massive sheet of rain. And then we drove the car into the rain and I was inside the storm. It was just like that. It's exactly like that. The problem is when you are inside of something, it completely changes your perspective. Now, this is where we get back to you being that vivometer in your perspective scope, because there's two perspectives taking place that nobody knows about. The first perspective is you inside the bubble. When you are inside of something, it's going to look completely different when you're outside of it. So now you got the insider point of view and the outsider point of view. And this is vital to you understanding something. Everything that you understand or don't understand is 100% because you are an insider or an outsider. Outsiders have no idea what it's like on the inside, and insiders have no idea what it's like on the outside. But insides don't even know that there's an outside. It's like they're fish in a river, and they have no idea they're in a river. And that's exactly what's going on. You are a fish in a bowl, and you don't know that you're in a bowl. You're looking in going, oh, look, there's a reflection of another fish, and I think it's another fish, and it's moving just like me. And you have no idea that you are a little fish inside of a little bowl, because you have no perspective. You're not going to get perspective until you have relativity, because relativity is what gives you perspective. But if you don't have relativity, you're not going to have perspective. So you're going to be confused and lost and disoriented, which is why you don't know who you are. That's right. That's right. This is exactly how the brain works. It's amazing. It's amazing. So once you understand that you require relativity in order to understand anything, now you're talking about relative perspective. Relative perspective is something you've never heard of before because I just made it up. I actually did not make it up. I just made up the name for what a lot of people have already kind of figured out but don't quite know about. Scientists are going, yeah, that, relative perspective. But if you don't have a name for it, you're not going to know exactly what it is. So now that I've got a name for it, we can talk about it. Relative perspective is what you find out when you study integrated mathematics. When you study integrated mathematics, you discover relative perspective. And when you have relative perspective, you can understand the world because you're, oh, I'm not going to understand anything because I live in a fish bubble. And then you get out of the fish bubble and you go, wow, I now have relative perspective. It's that person who grows up in a little shit town and everyone's in the shit town going, yeah, I've been living here for 60 years and I've never left. That is not something to brag about. You have no relative perspective. And then there's other people who say, Mom, Dad, I want to go out and explore the world. Those are somebody looking for the relative perspective. And then they go out and they explore the world and they go to all the countries. My aunt did this. And then she comes back and she went, oh. And then she never came back again. And it's because of relative perspective. Somebody who grows up inside of a small town and never leaves has no relative perspective. But once you leave the small town, boy, do you get relative perspective. But no one knows that that is what it's called. It's perspective that you gain through relativity of a single point. Now, this point is called origin. Origin. And once you get to a different location, further away from the point of origin, you gain perspective. Perspective is something you only get when you move away from origin. But this is what people who are stuck inside that little shitty town never get because they are living inside the origin, which is the closed-minded point of view. And that is where you lack relative perspective. So once you get outside, you go, oh my God, I was in a fish bubble the whole time. And then the further you get out and the further away you move, the more perspective you gain. Imagine the perspective you'll gain if you ever get outside into space. Now that's a lot of perspective. And imagine how much perspective you'll gain if you move outside of that region. Really a lot of perspective. So that is relative perspective. That is exactly it. Now, relative perspective, that's where they keep wisdom. That is exactly where they keep wisdom. Wisdom is contained inside of relative perspective. You want wisdom with a capital W? You need relative perspective. And there are stages of relative, those are the 12 stages of ethical perspective, human growth, and evolution. The 12 ethical stages are the relative perspective, and the further you get into the levels of consciousness and awareness, the more wisdom you get. Because you are moving further away from your point of origin, so you have relative perspective. And every one of those stages is time. The progression of you moving away from the origin to a greater perspective is time. That's time. So, this concludes you taking out the garbage, making sure you clean out your perspective scope, and you making sure that you calibrate your vivometer, which we will be talking about later to show you how to clean out your VAS, which is your reticular articulating system. Thank you so much. And may the kindest of words always find you.